Hi guys, nice to meet you all. So a little bit about me. That's me riding up Cheddar Gorge last weekend on a bike for 128 miles. Don't know why, but I'm a bit of a geek. I do stuff for charity. I love InfoSec and all that kind of stuff. STEM ambassador, and I'm currently at IBM as a security architect. So let me just kind of jump straight in, I suppose. Ignorance is bliss. So who's seen The Matrix? Has anybody here seen The Matrix? So you probably know what I mean by ignorance is bliss when Cypher makes a deal with the Sentinels to go back into the Matrix because he knows that that steak isn't really a steak. Yeah. So what we're looking at there is a kind of willful ignorance. So Cory Doctorow had a good deal to say at the 11th Hope Conference last year, in which denial begets nihilism. The belief that nothing in the world has real existence or a willful ignorance, and we choose to ignore it because it doesn't exist. So, you know, a lot of the time we do that to kind of fulfill our own self-preservation. And more often than not, it will kind of lead us down to a kind of confirmation bias, which, you know, is a whole nother world that we could go into, but we'll keep it brief for the 15 minutes that we have. So, you know, one of the things that kind of fascinates me about this, I suppose, is, you know, you might be looking at a social media channel where, you know, you like certain things and you follow certain trends. And of course, you know, the thing about that is we then start to kind of get down a road of echo chamber. And I don't know if anyone's ever heard of echo chamber before, but what I kind of mean is that if you're in a room full of people that all agree on the same principles and the same ethics, then you're never going to have a two-way conversation. You're never going to have conflicts of interests. And, you know, I think that's kind of a little bit sad in a way because, you know, I like a bit of banter. I like a bit of, you know, no, I don't think you're right on that. And I think that's what makes us good. The thing is, you know, this might be good in a perfect utopia, but, you know, we're human. We're not perfect by any way, shape or form. So that kind of takes me on to nothing to hide, which really, really kind of makes me laugh. You know, people always say, oh, I've got nothing to hide. Got nothing to hide. So, you know, a few years ago, I used to say to people, well, take your clothes off. You know, tell me, sorry, beg your pardon. Take your clothes off. Tell me what your pay is. You know, tell me what ailments you have. And I'm completely screwing the slides up there. But, you know, and again, Cory summed it up perfectly last year. And it's not what you've got to hide. It's about what you choose to keep private. You know, it's about what you choose to keep personal. And sometimes, you know, I think there's a boundary which is being crossed quite a lot of the time. You know, we all know what you do when you go to the toilet, right? You know, we all know how people were made, you know, your mum and dad, you know. But it takes a special kind of person, you know, to go to the toilet with the door open, right? So you know, it's about choosing what we want to keep private. So I can't really do a presentation on privacy, you know, without agreeing to the T's and C's. You know, who agrees to T's and C's in this room? We do it all the time, you know. Oh yeah, I love that app, yeah. I'll agree to the terms and conditions, you know. What does it actually say? Heck, you know, I'm sure if I know. And it reminds me of an old episode of South Park in which they make this human Sentai pad. You know, you may or may not remember this, but you know, little Kyle there, he gets a new iPod and he wants iTunes. So, you know, yeah, he willfully accepts the terms and conditions. And then Steve Jobs and his crew come along to kidnap him and make him into an Apple concoction. So, you know, and kind of going back to, you know, the tick box, you know, this you know, this one that you have to read 3-4 times to actually understand whether you are or are not sharing your details with a third party. You know, and you know, you have to read it 3-4 times. And And the problem that I see with this as well is that, do these third parties, use the same security mechanisms that the company that you're entrusting your information with in the first place use? Or for instance, what are they doing with that data? How are they measuring that data? What are they using that data for? The chances are we probably don't know and we'll never know. And what I call that is the kind of the I tell two friends theory. So if this works,
well, you know how these things start. One guy tells another guy something, and then he tells two friends, and they tell two friends, and they tell their friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. You know how these things go.
We've got all this data out there. We don't know what's going on with it, and ultimately, who now has it, if that makes any sense at all. I think you know what I mean. Sorry, just get this. So we've covered ignorance and privacy denial, nothing to hide, T's and C's, which takes me on to the data deluge. Who's got cloud storage nowadays? Everyone, right? You, me, even Granny's got it, right? We've got it because it's helpful for all sorts of reasons, and we can use it for many, many different things. The thing I see with this is that every single day, billions of photos, videos, texts, the metadata, not to mention databases, banking transactions, all across the globe. The businesses are collecting our consumer preferences, everything about us. And this deluge of data is growing so fast. In 2013, we're looking at 4.4 zettabytes, and in 2020, we're looking at 44 zettabytes. For those that don't know what a zettabyte is, we're looking at 44 trillion gigabytes per zettabyte. So it kind of puts into perspective what this kind of data deluge is doing. And we drive down the street and there's cameras taking pictures of us and all this information being collected and used for whatever reason. And of course it doesn't matter because I've got nothing to hide. There's new laws and legislations, data protection regulations coming out, GDPR, but there's still a lot of ambiguity around the actual ways in which they can process the information. I've been on the phone quite a few times to the ICO and asked them questions about the data that I'm processing or handling. They've actually come back and said, I don't actually know. We don't have an answer for you. And so, what is it that they can actually fundamentally do with this data going forward? So does privacy matter? What are the concerns? What's the information overhang? What's UBI and the singularity? So that's what we'll cover right now. So, in a society where we're taught by measuring from such a young age, right? How much is this one better than the other one? I want the latest iPhone 42 and things like that. And I get the idea of measuring to a degree. If we want to measure something to put a new healthcare system to treat cancer or a renewable energy force, great. I'm all for it. But, to build up a digital profile about, what I'm looking at on the internet, what I'm doing on the internet, what things I've been browsing, and every single interaction which you're possibly doing, which is being logged, not to mention the mass surveillance which is going on and the recent request by the government to have next to near time real-time access to the ISPs. We start using this stuff for even more purposes and purposes that we didn't perhaps realise why we were measuring this in the first place. So, So it's really interesting to kind of, understand, what information it is that's being built up on our digital profiles, and how this will be used in the future. The big problem I see is the information overhang, as I like to call it. So, this is just a guesstimation slide, right? We've got a load of compute out in the wild right now, loads of compute. How much of that is actually being used? This laptop here right now, it's a quad core with however many gigs of RAM. I'm showing a PowerPoint presentation right now. Is that making full use of the compute and memory power of my computer? Probably not. So this is what I call the information overhang. And, we're getting better with, using scalability, AWS, containers. The average life of a container now is 7 seconds in the cloud, which, is pretty gripping stuff. But, with the adoption of AI, every single week you hear something new about some new fangled AI or AGI. Now, does anybody know AGI or deep AI? So AGI is the term for artificial general intelligence. So when the AI becomes self-aware and it's able to pass the Turing test, what will happen with this extra compute power which is available to it? We don't actually know what's going to happen. So when you look at the information overhang and an AGI which is able to change and upgrade and expand and scale beyond any recognition that we can actually fathom in our heads, and will it develop at a rate that we can't actually keep up with, is a really kind of scary thought. Google's director of engineering, Ray Kurzweil, he estimates that around 2045 is when we'll start developing the real first true AGI. And that's when probably we'll start looking at what's called the technological or the economic singularity. So, UBI is the Universal Basic Income, and the technological and economic singularity. So, Finland are already processing universal basic income. And like I said, when the AGI really starts to take off, it's hard to say whether it will be great or if it will be destructive. Like I said, it's changing at a rate that even we can't comprehend. It's making better decisions. It's making, technology grow exponentially. So what then happens with our cognitive jobs? What happens with, the jobs that we know today that are going to be able to be done by this AGI or this robot or this deep learning, and last time round, when we had the Industrial Revolution, it took our mechanical jobs. When we have the economic singularity or the technological singularity, it'll be gunning for our white collar and our cognitive jobs. So, it's a really kind of interesting subject, especially when we correlate all the information that I talked about previously, about all the information that's being kept about us, how it's being measured, how it's being scored, how we get those annoying adverts down the side of all the things we've been looking at. Pi-hole, if you ever want to get rid of that at home. But, it kind of brings me back to the rhetoric, that we first started out on this conversation. At the end of the day, does privacy matter? Well, ignorance is bliss, right? So, thanks for listening. Have you got any questions? And there's some links up there.